you're one of the pillars of the baseball community, so I got to ask you this. You've covered a lot of games. If you can go through the World Series, of all the World Series that you cover, what is the most memorable World Series for you?
1991, the Braves and the Twins had finished in last place the year before, and now they're in the World Series. The first 6 games were spectacular, and then Jack Morris pitched a 10-inning, 1-0 shutout in Game 7. And I was in the Metrodome. It is the loudest building I've ever been in my entire life. I couldn't even hear my colleague who was sitting 1 foot away from me. That's how loud it was, and I was at Sports Illustrated at the time. So I wrote the story after the game about Jack Morris pitching a shutout all by himself. And Randy Bush of the Twins came up to me, and he said, because they tried to take Jack Morris out of the game, and Randy Bush of the Twins said, if they had tried to take him out of the game, it would have been the first time in history that a pitcher killed his manager on the mound, because there was no way Jack Morris was coming out of that game.
I love it. That's good. So, man, you're a baseball lifer, so I'm going to ask you this, and this is my one of my punchline questions. I do Mount Rushmore. Now, I know you've probably been asked this in variations, but we're going to have fun. I want you to give me one pitcher, one infielder, one outfielder, one catcher for your baseball Mount Rushmore. We'll start off with catcher.
Johnny Bench is the greatest catcher of all time. Won 2 MVPs in a World Series before he turned 25 years old. There's never been a better defensive catcher. There's never been a catcher that threw better than him. And he was a great home run hitter for a great team, maybe the greatest team in the history of the National League. Right. Okay, what's next?
Infielder.
The greatest infielder, this is really hard to do. I'm going to say Lou Gehrig is the greatest infielder of all time, because I believe he's one of the 5 greatest hitters ever. And if he hadn't gotten sick, he would have retired as the all-time leader in RBIs and runs scored. I think he was an underrated player all those years, and I think being he's the best first baseman ever, so I'm going to take him.
Okay, outfielder.
Willie Mays is the greatest outfielder of all time, because when he came in 1951, he was the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense that the game had ever seen. And here it is, 75 years later, and he's still, to me, the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense of all time.
And last but not least, pitcher.
Walter Johnson is the greatest pitcher of all time. And I'm not just saying that because I went to Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland.
Oh, wow.
And wrote for the school paper, which was called The Pitch. I did some work for the yearbook, which was called The Windup. He won 417 games, he threw 110 shutouts, and if he hadn't pitched on so many bad teams all those years, he would have won 500 games. He's the best pitcher ever, and I don't think there's a close second.
Oh, wow. Okay. With you covering the game, and you've seen, obviously, some of the greatest talents come through in more, obviously, modern time, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, we've seen variations of guys that are elite pitchers, elite hitters, but to see what he's doing, obviously he's going through his second Tommy John now, but seeing Shohei Ohtani be able to cover him, how does that work for you as a journalist that's covered this game so long? And we always say we may not ever see a Babe Ruth type, right? But now we're seeing that in the flesh. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I can't call him the greatest player of all time yet, because Babe Ruth is the greatest hitter ever and still has more shutouts than Pedro Martinez. Think about that for a second. But Shohei is the most remarkable player that I've ever seen. That's the adjective you have to use, because Babe Ruth didn't throw this hard. Babe Ruth didn't run quite like this. Babe Ruth didn't hit the ball as far as Shohei does. So, to me, he's the most remarkable player I've ever seen. To do what he's doing in this era is absolutely breathtaking.
I love it. Last question, man. So, this Texas Rangers team, a lot of people say this is like 2010. They kind of came out of nowhere, per se. They have the guys like Simeon Seager, the All-Stars. But looking at this Rangers team, seeing what you may have thought previously before the season to now, what are your thoughts about this team? And do you think this team does have what it takes to actually win the World Series this year?
I do. I saw them in spring training as one team that didn't make the playoffs last year, that could really make a run this year. But did I think they were going from 68 to 90 wins? No, I did not. But now that I've seen them for all 7 postseason games, they have an elite defense. They're the best offensive team in the American League. They lead the league in walks. The starting pitching is better than people think, and even their bullpen, the one weakness of the team, has been very good in the postseason. So I think they're not only good enough to get to the World Series, they're good enough to win the World Series.
I love it. I love it. Well, all I can say is this is a pleasure. You're a baseball lifer. You're on our Mount Rushmore of baseball journalists. Just let you know that I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.